I'm thrilled you asked me, and it was well timed with the report that we just came out with, and
I was wondering, like, I didn't see the report, so I wasn't sure that it was
yeah,
on
it came out
time.
on Tuesday, and part of my argument is that people matter more than money. We've been focused a little bit on the wrong. They're both important to address, but the people matter more. So, so we could talk about that some here.
Good, by all means. Um, okay, Rosaline just got admitted, which proves that Ali has that going on. And so I will be right back, okay?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, because we have an entire minute, but then it's a minute plus three before we actually get
Right.
started.
Like any good theater performance.
Like any good, yeah, we have to start at 2:03.
Okay.
I was at Christians United for Israel, and after the first evening session ended on time, I said, "These guys love us, but you know it's not a Jewish conference. All you have to do is see it running on time, and wait a minute, nope." Really true though. I went to two Jewish events recently, and definitely not. In fact, there was one where everybody had a 2-minute slot to speak.
Yeah,
And you learned that an awful lot of people, not true that, okay, let's be honest here. There were the people who were our non Jewish allies speaking also, who,
sure.
as soon as you hand them the microphone, they lose the ability to count to two.
I know. Well, I'm sure I'm guilty. I mean, it's hard to clear your throat in 2 minutes. So
There you go. So wait, I've got a schedule on my phone, so we're good. Okay. Rabbi Mencken introduces Jay Greene. That's very complicated. How long have we known each other?
well, I don't know, 6 years?
At least.
I
I
think
mean,
it feels
You were at Heritage. Actually, I don't even remember if you were still a professor doing adjunct. There was no such thing.
no, I mean I was a professor for many years, but I think I met you after I did the DEI and anti-Semitism report for Heritage.
I think that is true.
That's
I
how
think
we
that
met.
is true.
And that was I think within a year of my joining Heritage. That was in 2021.
Got it.
So 5 years ago. And you played a pivotal role in helping bring attention to that study. And I'm very grateful for that.
Well, thank you. It's like it needed a lot of coverage.
You
But
know what?
it was in Tablet Magazine, wasn't it, or something?
Uh, not that. I have some later things. I had something
Oh, you're
about.
right. It turned into a paper. It turned into an op-ed at some
I
point.
turned into a whole bunch of things. It kept going for a while, and I think it's one of the areas where we really turned the tide. I mean, there are rare occasions where things we write and talk about actually produce change in the world. I think this is one of them. Where,
And you say that we were pivotal in getting that out there?
oh, for sure, you noticed it and helped promote it right away, and it helped. There were many forces, but it was part of a very successful movement to change broad perception about DEI bureaucracies. They had previously been thought of as at minimum benign, right? That
Yeah, okay, that's
who's
fair.
against inclusion, right? And so the suggestion that there was something nefarious about them took effort, and we had some convincing to do and documenting how DEI bureaucracies were populated with an unusual number of Jew haters was part of convincing people that these bureaucracies were malevolent and not benign.
That is wild, you know. I didn't realize how instrumental we were in that
Where
particular effort.
were you? I mean, at least in helping me. I mean, but we're all small parts of a broader movement, so we can't take too much credit. But it mattered. I mean,
Oh, I'm happy to take too much credit.
it's just you could work for many years and not see anything happen. And to work on something and see things happen within a reasonably short period of time is very satisfying. And this is one of those occasions. And frankly, I think that this issue with universities is another area where we can produce a change in a reasonable time. This,
I would love for you to talk about this, the both the past, the DEI,
yeah,
and how
sure.
we had an impact,
Oh yeah.
and now you're
Yeah.
hoping here's another opportunity.
Yeah.
Because now I've got to stop talking with you to start talking with you.
Okay, sure. Sounds good.
Because we've had plenty of people join us in the interim, and thank you so much everybody for coming today. I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to introduce Jay Greene again. For those who've been listening for a little while, we were discussing how it's been at least 6 years, but I think it's been longer. Uh, but then again, I'm reminded the radio host who thinks that he'd been interviewing me for 15 years, and CJV is only 10 years old. So that definitely didn't happen. But here you go. But the bottom line is that Jay was working at Heritage Foundation and came out with a series of papers on DEI and its malign influence, where as all of you go back into it about how that changed the dialogue and has now emerged with a new paper. First of all, left Heritage when it was right to do so due to the little problem that Heritage has been having. Same reason why the National Task Force left after we threatened to leave the National Task Force. So that's definitely an area where I know that we had a profound influence. And our um, our problem that we are going to be discussing here is that it's not just about the foreign money flowing in, it's the foreign students flowing in to the elite universities. I did a quick look up. When I was a student at Princeton, a very low percentage of undergrads and maybe a third of graduate students were from foreign countries. And I have to admit that they were, many of them were great. I mean, Naiming Mok, who's today a professor of math in Hong Kong, I think that's a great position for him because I can tell you that he was more adept at mathematics than he was at learning English. But he was no, I mean whatever. He was my first year math professor, and in calculus, and it was it was all in all, it was a great experience, and it was of course a very different era. And now you have nearly half the student body in the graduate school, and I think it's nearly a third of the undergraduates are coming from foreign countries, and they're also not coming from countries like Sweden, where they love us. They're coming from places where they distinctly do not share American values. And as we've seen at Columbia and at Harvard and elsewhere, they have taken a leading role in anti American and anti Semitic activities on campus. It's not the same generation that we dealt with, but I am very delighted to turn over to the floor over to our dear friend, and you get to talk about DEI and our partnership on that for sure. And the fact that you were a professor, so therefore I'm going to throw the dignitary title in front of your name, Professor Jay Greene. Take it away.
Thank you very much for having me on. Yes, it's true that Rabbi Mencken and CJV played a very important role in helping promote my DEI trilogy. I wrote three reports for the Heritage Foundation when I joined them in 2021. Diversity University, Equity Elementary, and Inclusion Delusion. It was diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI were the three reports in order. It was a thing of beauty. And the third of those, inclusion delusion, was about the shockingly high prevalence of anti-Semites in DEI bureaucracies, which I was able to document by searching their Twitter feeds. And I think it was unsettling to the broad consensus at that time that these bureaucracies were beneficial or at a minimum innocuous, because who's against inclusion? Who's against making people feel welcome on campus? And once people began to realize that those bureaucracies were not engaged in that benign activity, but were actually had a more malevolent ideology motivating them, including anti-Semitism, then I think we were able to turn the tide on DEI bureaucracies, and CJV played a very helpful role in helping get that message out by helping me get my work out to a broader audience. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. I think we have another opportunity here to make an important difference. Because what I'm about to tell you, I think once people hear about it, it begins to shift automatically, very quickly, how they think about foreign involvement in universities. Now, when it comes to foreign involvement in universities, we have focused almost exclusively on money. So we spent a lot of time talking about how much money different governments from abroad have given to high-profile universities. Northwestern, for example, has received $1 billion from Qatar over 20 years. Now, a billion is a lot of money, but $1 billion spread over 20 years is rounding error in the Northwestern budget. Actually can't buy Northwestern for $1 billion over 20 years. It's not enough money. These universities are huge. Um, uh, Instead, the right way to think about that money is the money is being given to people who are already in place and empowering those people to do things with that money. So it's the people that we have to pay attention to more than the money, although we have to, I think, pay attention to both. So what is the flow of foreign people into the universities? Well, oh, just make sure to mute your Zoom. Okay. So so anyway, the flow of people, and it's not just students, but it's a whole pipeline we've built that has basically staffed the universities. They're employees and not just the students that is shifting universities from an American orientation towards a global or foreign orientation. So let me start out first by emphasizing that foreign students and staff contribute valuable skill, knowledge, and energy to U.S. higher education. I'm not against the contributions they have made in the past, and I don't want to cut off those contributions in the future. They help universities enormously, and they help our country enormously. This is all a question of balance. So while foreigners bring very valuable skills, knowledge, and energy, they also bring with them political risks. And one of the main political risks is that they, not having grown up in the United States and not having experienced an American education, are less likely to be familiar with and advocate for the American political system and its values. So even without any kind of conspiracy or operatives, they're simply not oriented on average to be as enthusiastic about the American political system as people who are born in this country, raised in this country, educated in this country. And so that's a risk if part of the mission of a university is to help convey the knowledge of the American political system and its values from one generation to the next. That will be undermined if we get too high of a critical mass of people who are not familiar with that political system and its values. So that's at a minimum. But also the other risk is when the numbers get really high, then we have a problem on the tails, where there will be a certain number of political operatives who are planted by foreign governments or non-governmental organizations with the intention of spreading hostility to the American political system and its values. And so when the numbers are large enough, it gets harder to monitor that, and that will become a problem as well. So the reason why this is all possible in higher education is because the restrictions that we normally have in place for foreigners entering the United States and working in the United States don't exist for higher education. Higher education is exempt from the normal restrictions on visas that exist for every for-profit company. Okay. And so there are two main types of visas that universities receive foreigners with. The first is an F1 visa. An F1 visa is the type of visa that students receive. Okay. So all undergraduate and graduate students come in with an F1 visa. The number of F1 visas that universities can bring in is unlimited. There's no cap. They can bring in as many as they wish to admit. Okay. And then importantly, you should think of F1 visa holders as workers, not students. And the reason why you should think of them as workers is that two-thirds of them are graduate students. And graduate students aren't simply enrolled for a degree, they also run the basic operations of universities. They teach intro classes, they run labs, they are workers. They're often paid a stipend, even though they're graduate students seeking a degree and on an F1 visa, they are employees of universities. In addition, even the master's level students, and even if they're not receiving a stipend from the university, they are still workers in the sense that the only place that an F1 visa holder is allowed to work in the United States is at the university they're at. So these students need to make some money to live, and so they are a captured pool of labor working at their universities, even if they are not on stipend in a doctoral program. So think of the graduate students as workers, okay? And then the other type of visa is H-1B visa. This is the most common form of visa for a foreign citizen to work in the United States. And there are 85,000 new H-1B visas given out each year to for-profit companies. And the demand for them is so high that they have to have a lottery to determine who gets one of those 85,000 H-1B visas. Universities are exempt. They have an unlimited number of H-1B visas they can sponsor. They can hire as many foreigners as they want. Okay. So what happens when the only way to enter the United States in an unlimited way, if you want to enter and work in the United States, the only way in is higher education. If you want to go work in some other way, there are caps, and it's very difficult. But it's not difficult to come into the United States either with an F1 visa or then later converting that into an H-1B visa. And that's why it's sort of like squeezing a balloon. This huge demand by foreigners to come into the United States has only one place to go, and that's higher education, which is why such huge numbers are seeking it out. And universities love the cheap labor, so they're willing to take them on. Okay.
Can I
So,
just interject one
yeah.
thing, Jay?
Sure.
When you said that the grad students on F1s are workers,
Yes.
a very large, you mentioned it, but a
Yes.
very large portion of what they do is staying in front of the classroom. They're
Right.
the ones teaching the classes.
They're
In
teaching
fact,
intro classes. They're
Harvard,
running
actually,
classes.
Harvard is very noted for this. I remember lampooning this in my day because in Princeton, they have a much smaller grad school, and you got genuine professors, Nobel laureates in front of the classroom teaching freshmen how to do basic physics.
Right.
If that course is being taught by a grad student from Syria, and you're a Jewish student in that class, your grade is dependent upon what that Syrian grad student thinks of you. And I just wanted to inject that as you went on.
Right. That's right. It's not merely the exchange of ideas. They are in positions of power in the university. They have leverage over others in the university because they give grades. That's true. And so they are able to promote hostility to America and to Jews and to Israel if that's their agenda. Or they, might simply be indifferent to America and its values because they just don't know about it, and don't think that this is a problem confined to the humanities or social sciences. Political and value questions come up in every field, including technical ones and the sciences. And so American values are not as likely to be taught and promoted positively, given the very high numbers of foreigners. So let's just talk about the numbers. So the growth in F1 visas has been dramatic. So from 2008, when Obama entered office, there were 671,000 F1 visa holders in the United States. Okay, that's how many students there were. And then since then, in the last 16 years, in 2024, we have almost 1.2 million. Okay, that's a 75% increase in 16 years in the number of F1 visa holders. Almost the entirety of that increase is in graduate students, not undergraduates. The graduate student enrollment from 2006 to 2024 increased 83%. But I'm sorry, that's graduate foreign enrollment. The undergraduate foreign enrollment only increased 13%. So there's been almost no increase in the number of foreign undergraduates with F1 visas, but a huge increase in the graduate foreign students with F1 visas. Okay, and remember so that means you have over 600,000 graduate students with F1 visas working in universities. They're workers, they're not students primarily. Okay. In addition to that, there's a thing called the Optional Practical Training Program, or OPT. Optional Practical Training Program allows people with F1 visas to stay in the United States and work for up to 3 years with the sponsorship of their university after they have completed their degree. So F1 visa holders can come as graduate students, they can get paid and are working, running their universities, and even when they finish their degree, they can continue working at their university for 3 more years after they finish their degree with their student visa, even though they're no longer students. Okay. And the number of OPT participants has gone from under 70,000 to 300,000 between 2008 and 2024. So you've had, five-time increase basically in OPT participants. So the OPT participants are workers. So you have the F1 visa graduate students who are running the university. You have the OPT F1 visa holders working in universities, and then you have H1B when they're done with the OPT, or when they or even if they just are done with their F1 without having done OPT, they can apply for jobs at their universities and seek H1B sponsorship and convert their F1 visa status into H1B visa status. Now, the number of H1B visas issued each year to people working at colleges and universities averaged 11,000 over a decade between 2010 and 2021. But in 2022, it spiked up to 16,000. And it's been level up there at 16,000 since. Okay, so that's the number of newly issued H-1B visas each year. That's a flow measure. So now they can be with their H-1B visa for up to 6 years. By the way, during all this time, many of these F1 and H-1B visa holders are converting into green card holders. They get status, they marry someone, they apply for and qualify in one way or another. And so they're becoming green card holders and citizens sometimes in a reasonably short period of time. We saw this with Mahmoud Khalil. He comes with an F1 visa a year, he gets married. Within a year, he's a green card holder. Okay. So it doesn't take that long and it's not that hard once you're in the US. And the F1 visa is the way in, and it's unlimited. And the number of H1B visas given to those to workers at universities is also unlimited. And so what we've done is we've built a pipeline of people who want to get into the US that steers them into higher education, and it's distorting the composition and priorities of higher education to the point where now 22% of all faculty in the US are foreign born. 28% of every university has had a foreign born leader in the past decade. Now, you might say, well, look, what's the big deal? Again, foreigners bring a lot of talent, they bring a lot of skill. This is a good thing. They're helping improve the quality of our universities, and they are. But we have to balance that benefit again against political risk. So, what are the dangers if the concentrations get too high? And by the way, the concentrations are high. At the Ivy League, a third of all enrollments, undergraduate and graduate, are foreign. Okay, so at our most selective universities, basically we're one third foreign in our enrollment, and in graduate school it's a half, basically, in our most selective institutions. So they're very heavily foreign dominated in our most elite institutions, and these are the institutions that train the future leaders of government and companies. And so, if we alter the priorities and values of those institutions, we are going to change the priorities of people who go on to lead American corporations and American governmental institutions. And so, what is some evidence that this story that I'm telling you of value changes occurring? What's some evidence of it happening? Well, I've looked at the relationship between concentrations of H-1B visas at universities and post-October 7th protests. Now, those protests weren't merely anti-Israel, and they weren't merely anti-Semitic. They were also explicitly anti-American. They included a lot of themes that were hostile to the West, that were hostile to capitalism. And so you saw in the October 7th protests not just expressions of upset about the current situation in Israel, but you saw a broader attack on the American political system and its values. So looking at the number of those protests and how they're related to concentrations of H-1B visas holders at universities could be illuminating. And what I find is that, in fact, the number of protests goes up dramatically as the concentration of H-1B visas goes up. So I looked at cities and I counted how many university H-1B holders there were in different cities or towns in the US, and the number of anti-Israel protests in those towns. The number of anti-Israel, anti-Western post-October 7th protests were collected by the Crowd Counting Consortium at Harvard. Actually keeps a database tracking these protests. And what I found is that when you had fewer than 50 H-1B visa holders in a city, the average number of protests between October 7th and the end of 2024 was one. So very low rate of protests in places with a low number of H-1B holders. But as you go up, the number of protests goes up as well. So between 50 and 100, you start to get, let me pull up these numbers just so I can tell them to you correctly. You get 9.5 protests on average in a city that has between 50 and 100. If you have between 100 and 150, it's 12.5 protests. If you have between 150 and 200 H-1B visa holders at universities in a city, you'll have 26.2 protests on average. Between 200 and 300 H-1B holders, it's 35.7 protests. And if you have more than 300 H-1B holders in a city, you have on average more than 67 protests between October 7th and the end of 2024. So then I did the same thing also with students, with F1 visa holders, and not just H-1B. And it's the same thing, that basically when the concentration at universities exceeded 13%, the number of protests more than doubled. So as concentrations of foreigners goes up, the rate at which you'll see these protests also goes up. Now, this is not proof. This should be alarming evidence that should support the theory that I've just articulated to you about the political risks of high concentrations of foreigners at universities, but but it's not proof. And the reason why it's not proof is the causation could go the other way. Could be that places that are inclined to be anti-American are also the places most eager to hire and admit foreigners. Um, and so there's some chicken and egg problem here that we can't fully sort out. But we don't have to sort it out. We don't need proof to be aware of risks and to think about sensible efforts to balance benefits against risks. And so, what could be done? Well, frankly, we don't have to go back to, um, uh, you know, or we don't have to eliminate foreigners from universities to get this problem under control. All we have to do is adopt caps that are comparable to the kinds of limits that we have for foreigners entering private industry in the US. And so that way we don't steer every foreigner seeking to get into the US into academia. They're talented people, they might go elsewhere, or they might not be able to get in at all, but we don't want to concentrate every talented foreigner in academia. Um, uh, and so one of the ways we could do this is put a cap so that no more than 15% of total enrollment at a university is F1 visa holder. Okay, we could do that. That would frankly just bring us back to where we were when Obama started as president. We were below that threshold at almost every university at that point. And so that this is not a draconian change. It's just going back about, universities were very effective places filled with smart people back then. They could function just fine with more moderate levels of foreign enrollment. And that would be one way to do that. I should mention that President Trump, in his proposed Compact for Higher Education, did suggest a 15% cap, but he suggested it only on undergraduate enrollment. And unfortunately, that actually missed the problem. Even Harvard doesn't exceed the 15% cap on undergraduate enrollment. And so that's why you need to have it be a 15% cap on total enrollment, graduate and undergraduate. The other thing we could do is cap or eliminate OPT, which is the optional practical training program. It's unclear why we should have a program for people who are admitted to the US to get a degree, then be able to work after they complete their degree with the same visa that they had as a student. Um, uh, the theory behind an F1 visa was supposed to be that foreigners would come, study, learn about the American political system and its values, and then go home, where we could then export our values to their countries. Instead, what we're doing is we're importing their values into the institutions that train our elite. And so it's unclear why we want to encourage people who are supposed to come and go home to come and stay working. And so it's unclear why the OPT program should exist. And then the other thing we could do is we could pause the issuance of new H-1B visas for universities until we can get a better handle on the situation. I should mention that the governors of both Florida and Texas have already done this for their state universities. They have frozen the issuance of the hiring of new H-1B visa holders at their public universities. And then lastly, a longer term fix for the H-1B visa issue at universities might be to force universities to compete in the same pool as for-profit companies for the 85,000 new visas that are available for H-1B holders each year. It's unclear why we should privilege Stanford over Google. I don't know why it should be so much easier for Stanford to get H-1B visa holders than for Google to get them. And so why don't we put them on the same playing field, level playing field, and have them all compete for the same visas? And that would then not steer all of the foreigners into higher education, and would keep the levels moderate enough so that we could have a balance between the benefits of foreign skill and the political risks of excessive concentrations of foreigners. So that's this is my spiel to you. It was this all was in a paper that I released this last week on Tuesday with the Defense of Freedom Institute, where I'm a senior fellow. I'm also director of research at Do No Harm, but that's where I do my medical activities. There's a whole issue there we could talk about with the high concentration of foreign medical graduates that we hire into U.S. medical residencies. That's a whole nother issue, but it's a similar kind of problem where we create this this pipeline of foreigners in high concentrations, and it leads to political problems. I should just quickly mention with that foreign medical graduates being hired into residence that I did an analysis on the campaign contributions to the squad in 2024. On average, 18% of their money came from doctors trained in foreign medical schools. So if you want to know where the Red-Green Alliance comes from in the US, it's much as it was with the national health system in England. It's a high concentration of foreign doctors, foreign trained doctors that are some of the most sophisticated and networked givers of campaign funds to leftist radicals like the Squad. So we could talk about that too, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts and questions on these issues.
Well, thank you so much for that tremendous presentation. And I've already gotten a few private notes about what a great speaker we got this time. So
Oh,
thank you
go
for that. Thank you for that. But just, yeah, it's just, well, no, I mean, I'm sure I also got ones about what a pain he is, but you know,
on.
you can only tease my friends. It's very good, but I
uh,
really do appreciate this. And
sure.
everybody should know, by the way, if you didn't figure it out already, as several did, please put your questions in the chat so I can read them to Professor Greene and he can go ahead and provide his erudite answers. But before we do that, two housekeeping things. I mean, one is I have to ask for support because obviously the work of CJV, all the great things that we are doing, including influencing the DEI agenda. I'm now going to be clipping what it was that you said, unless you want to repeat it even better. And we'll go ahead and use that to promote our work. You know, stop, because that's really something where, I mean, obviously the tide is really turning. And you definitely were, you know, your DEI paperwork was definitely a big part of that. Um, in fact, Ali now has the CJV team will be posting to the chat. There you go. A bunch of links, but I also, CJV team, aka Ali, please be aware that I sent you 3 links for the papers on diversity university, equity elementary, and inclusion delusion. Was equity elementary the second one?
Yeah, yeah, it
Good.
was in
Okay.
order.
I
Yeah,
just wanted to be sure I was right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But so, Ali, if you could please post those 3 links to the chat also so that everybody's got them. But then we can, so I would like to, that's lovely. I just got a little thumbs up floating up in the chat from CGBT. I'm going to take care of that. Watch the miracles happen. But everybody should please go to our website, cjvalues.org. That's in fact one of the links, the last one there, number 5. Support CJV. Go to that one first, make a donation, become a contributor, become a monthly contributor, you know, help us continue getting this work done, because it is thanks to your previous support that we have a director of operations to put those links in the chat, make things happen, set up the schedule for speakers, and do all the work that makes this possible. We have a director of federal affairs going down to Washington so that I can run the organization instead of going to meetings where I hear lots of things that are not relevant, to pull out that nugget or two that we really need to know. And number 3, and you know what? I didn't start this meeting by having that little moment to point out the loss of a huge ally in our work. We know the office of Senator Lindsey Graham very well. Uh, Initially, it was because of his uh, religious education week. He had a resolution passed every year in the Senate supporting religious education. And a resolution has no teeth, it has no power, but it laid the groundwork for the Educational Choice Act, the ECCA, which became part of the one big beautiful bill that got passed last year. That was Lindsey Graham's contribution. And obviously, he was as rock solid as they come on understanding who is right in a fight between Jews running a democratic country and terrorists running its murderous terrorist organization. For some reason, a lot in Congress are not so solid in their understanding of the difference. And Lindsey Graham was one of those huge allies, and it was remiss of me that I didn't open by speaking about that. But anyway, so yeah, that's the director of federal affairs. That's part, obviously going to be part of his work is making a connection with whoever the new appointee and then the new elected officer is to that Senate seat. And then we have a director of external relations also doing work with our non-Jewish allies in all of these spaces, including DEI. So our ability to do this work has been magnified by the donations we've received, and that's why I should be calling for everybody to make more of them. Now, having covered both aspects of the housekeeping, put your questions in the chat. Here are all the links. Actually, I guess that's three. And send your money, right? Uh, the first question that we got was, wouldn't it be best to stop the professors and faculty who are already at these schools from bringing in colleagues? Case in point, now I can't read that first name, but someone Führer, wow, well, that's a name, in the U.S., Sami Al-Aryan, an IT professor at USF in Tampa, asked, um, he brought in another jihadi, Ramadan Shallah, who left U.S. to go to Damascus to take apparently to take over as head of Palestinian Islamic Jihad after the Mossad got rid of the last one. And this guy was a professor, according to Barb. And I don't know. You can evaluate the truth of that claim and also give us your answer to that.
Sure. So, yes, we of course need to identify and, if possible, remove from their positions, particularly bad actors. It's easier to do when people are not citizens. Um, uh, and uh, but frankly, given the scale of this foreign pipeline into staffing universities with 1.2 million F1 visas and scores of thousands of OPT and H1B visa hirings into universities each year. It overwhelms the ability of the American bureaucracy to find the bad actors. Like, the American bureaucracy itself is not very capable of screening who the bad guys are before they come in when there's such a high volume of activity. They can't properly screen 1.2 million people. Um, they can't screen, 100,000 new every year. This is hard for them to do. They don't have the staff for it. They don't have the capabilities. They don't have the talent for it. And so what we need then is for universities to be partners with the government in helping keep out bad actors. And part of the problem we have is that universities have no incentive to screen. They don't care. And part of why they don't care is because these visas are not scarce, right? When something is not scarce, you're irresponsible with it. When there's no scarcity, you don't care if it's wasted on someone who's no good. Um, so part of the benefit of capping the number of F1 visas, capping the number of H1B visas, and eliminating OPT is we make foreign skilled people more scarce. And by making them more scarce at universities, universities will have an incentive to scrutinize them themselves more carefully, to think about whether those people really contribute to their institutions in ways that senior leaders care about. Now, senior leaders, they actually tend not to be radical ideologues. They tend to be very interested in bringing money and glory to their institutions. And they, if something is scarce, they will develop systems for finding people who will, you know, be great researchers, who will be skilled people, who will bring glory and money to their universities. Those people are less likely to be political radicals and troublemakers. And so we would get universities to help us, help the government scrutinize who's coming in and who's staying in if these spots were scarce. But if they're unlimited, then who cares? Let them all in, and whatever happens, happens. And so, yes, we have some particularly bad actors. We're fortunate that Samuel Arian was identified by U.S. authorities, that he was prosecuted. Um, uh, that's great, but honestly, we just can't expect the government to find every bad actor. We need everyone else to help with that, to find those bad actors and keep them out. And part of how we do that is with scarcity.
I think in the process of talking about scarcity and the need for that, you're also answering the next question we got from Olga Martin, which is a follow-up really, is, well, isn't that an argument for cutting it out entirely, not having any foreign grad students, etc., which of course is understandable, but I think you're pointing out why that would actually be a bad idea because there are people who come in and make a very positive contribution. And if there was scarcity, well, I'll let you answer.
Sure. I mean, I just watched Oppenheimer the other night. And it just struck me like, wow, there were a lot of European Jews who came into the US with incredible skills. And were it not for a bunch of European Jewish refugees entering academia, we would have had a much harder time building the bomb and winning World War II. Um, so look, foreign talent and energy has helped this country enormously, and there's no reason why we should cut ourselves off entirely from it. But we should also
Hey,
note that with in the movie Oppenheimer, there are also radicals who come in, and there are foreign agents who come in. And so we have to balance. Everything is about balance, right? We need to balance the benefits of foreign skill and energy against the risks. And we do that by setting reasonable limits and then allowing for processes of scrutiny to keep out bad actors.
you reminded me that Albert Einstein was a foreign exchange
Well,
professor.
right. I mean, right. I mean,
He actually came over to do a couple of lectures, and he decided, based on what the Nazis were doing, to not go back.
right, right,
But
right. So,
it
I
was
mean,
thanks to uh, the immigration policies that were active at the time that he was able to find refuge here.
right. Now we were very strict and we had very, very tight limits on entering the US back then. And we didn't have an established F1 visa program back then. So it was hard. Now it's too easy. When something is too easy and unlimited, you get problems. And I think that the I don't think anyone intended for this. I don't think it's conspiracy. I don't think the university's intended to bring in bad actors as a whole. I don't think that was their plan. But they once they had this pipeline built of these cheap foreign workers. I mean, they're basically the grape pickers of academia. They do all the work that the faculty used to do and don't want to do anymore. They don't want to teach intro classes. They don't want to have to do the scut work in labs. They have foreigners who do it for nothing. And by the way, it's not that we do have talented Americans who might do it, but they go into finance or something else because they make good money there. Graduate students don't make they make something, but they don't make very good money, and they live, six to a shared house in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's not great. Foreigners are thrilled because they just get into the U.S. and once in, they never have to leave. But we don't want to build a pipeline like that. It shouldn't be an immigration dodge. It should be something that helps improve the quality of our universities, and it should be a program for exporting our values by making them return home after having learned about American institutions, and they could then bring those values back to their home countries.
So I got a question from Richard. I read, quote, I regularly read about universities bragging about how they evade restrictions on DEI. So I don't know if he's asking this about DEI, but you could certainly ask it about the. Apparently, from what you've just said, the visa restriction, there are no visa restrictions.
Right,
There's very little vetting going on. The United States is not doing serious vetting. The universities are not doing serious vetting. If there was a limited pool for the universities, they would be doing serious vetting. You made a very good argument there. So I guess he's asking about the DEI issue, but why is it that how do we ensure that the restrictions actually? I mean, look, I'm from Princeton. I get to really complain about this because, in the absence of really serious investigation of Princeton due to Columbia and Brown and Yale and Harvard being so much worse, the president of Princeton has been flying the banner of academic freedom. And I just had a letter to the Alumni Weekly, which comes out every month or so. Go figure. But it used to be a weekly. And they finally deigned to publish a letter of mine saying he is being so tone deaf to the needs of the moment and Title VI, because it used to be, German academia ruined German academia by deciding it was okay to hate Jews as long as you called it anti-Semitism. Well, today they're saying it's okay to hate Jews as long as you call it anti-Zionism, and DEI officials are leading that. So, I guess it's the whole question of
right.
academic freedom, free speech. You're a professor, you get to talk to this issue.
Sure. So, uh, let's hold the free speech issue for later, but for now, just to address the how can we trust university leaders to do anything? Basically, we impose restrictions and they cheat, and they even brag about cheating. That's the argument, as I understand it. And there's some truth to this, but I think it mischaracterizes what the average university senior leader looks like. They are not raving radicals as a whole. Okay. I mean, I was in grad school with Claudine Gay. And I could tell you, she was not a radical. Um, she was ambitious, is what she was. And that is the dominant characteristic of university senior leaders, is that they're very, very ambitious. And they will do things when they think it helps them rise in power and status, but they will ditch it the moment they think it's a liability. And so Claudine Gay promoted DEI and helped enforce it because it paved the way for her rise in power in the university. It did that in part because it was the fashionable, trendy thing that she was championing, but it also did it because she used it to prevent criticism of herself and also to make it so that there would be a demand for her to rise higher. Okay. So, but power and status are the dominant motivations of senior leaders, not radical ideology. And so once it becomes clear that having a DEI bureaucracy and promoting a DEI ideology on campus through official channels is something that will get the university in trouble, that will hurt donations, that may cut off government grants, that may be inconsistent with state law at a public university, these things actually begin to go away. I'm not saying they disappear overnight, because there are individuals at the universities who still want it and they will still try to figure out a way to evade, but the institutional backing of these movements falls apart, because once the thing is punished and not rewarded, it becomes a lot less attractive. And so you have to have a theory of what motivates people at universities. And if your theory is that they're kind of raving radicals all the way up to the top, then you basically it's hopeless. Then you like burn the places down. There's no alternative. But I don't think that's correct. I think that there are pockets of radicals in universities, but the average university administrator is basically Hillary Clinton. Ambitious, will glom on to something radical if it helps, but will ditch it the moment it doesn't.
You know, it's really interesting that you point that out because what you said along the way is that Claudine Gay, was she a DEI officer or was she just promoting DEI?
She was promoting DEI.
But
She was not a DEI officer.
but
She
by making DEI a dead end within the
Yes.
university, that you can't get out of that role. You can't rise further. You're automatically making it a situation where these ambitious folks who really want to promote these ideals won't become DEI officers. And, hopefully it'll be treated as something radioactive.
Right. I'm not sure you can stigmatize it to that level, but it won't be a rewarded ideology on campus. And once it's not a rewarded ideology, it fizzles. It's sort of like what's the attraction of communist bureaucracy in East Germany? Well, it's because, you got to be powerful and high status. And once the wall falls and the government falls apart, the same people who were, senior bureaucrats in East Germany, they ditched it. They don't believe in their heart. I saw someone ask, I could just see in the chat, well, how's Hillary not radical? I understand the question. I'm just saying you got to grade on a curve, okay? And there's Hillary Clinton, and then there's AOC, and there's a difference between those. And there are people who are center left who you might not like, and you think promote bad things, but they're not pursuing the same kind of radical agenda that we see in the squad and in the rising, groups of Islamists and Jew haters that we see in, making gains in the Democratic Party and in academia.
So, why did Claudine Gay say that calls for genocide against Jews depend on context?
Because she remembered free speech as another, so that maybe that brings back in free. She remembers that was another thing, and she was afraid that the faculty might beat her up if she said something that was restrictive of. So she has to decide who's going to beat her up more. And so she was at that moment more afraid of faculty who would attack her for restricting free speech than she was of Jews attacking her for facilitating Jew hatred. That on top of, I have to say, she wasn't brilliant. You know, she was a moderately successful academic. She had a very small number of papers. She was published in some good journals, but she wasn't a leading academic.
So
I have to
she
say, I don't remember anything she ever said in grad school.
so
Not
she was a
because
great example of a diversity hire.
I I mean.
It's kind of what you're saying. I
I'm
know I'm exaggerating.
wasn't she's not dumb. She's not a terrible person. I don't remember her that way. I just remember her as ambitious and unrestrained ambition and an incentive system that rewards that ambition by pursuing bad things is going to get a lot more bad things.
That really, that kind of brings it full circle. I mean, there we are. And by the way, I'm working my way through. Um, oh, come on, who's the congresswoman who asked her the context question? Elise
Yeah.
Stefanik. I'm
Yeah.
working through Poisoned Ivies. Have you
Oh,
seen her book?
I've seen it, but I have not read it.
Want to get her in for one of these web
Yeah.
to promote her book
Oh yeah.
because it's fabulous. It's
Yeah.
just and I say this as a Princeton alum. I mean, I just like watching her rake them over the coals one after the other after the night. We were actually just in a meeting with staff to a leading congressman last week about SJP and its malign influence on campus and doing
Right.
another of these hearings. And then I went back to her book and realized she'd already written. We did a whole briefing paper on it, and I could have just plagiarized, lifted a couple chapters out of her book, done a
Yeah.
Claudine Gay on one of her books, and
Right.
and turned that over to the congressman and said, Elise Stefanik already did this research for us because obviously she had staff help do this, the digging, but it's just the book's fabulous. It covers, it's like bringing it's another one of
And
these swords in the arsenal that
right.
you know, you're bringing forth. And I really do appreciate, by the way, the compliment about our work on DEI that you brought in at the
Well, I
beginning,
mean, yeah,
because it
right.
just, just helps to
Even
amplify what we do the next
helps
time.
identify pivotal issues that will affect America and particularly Jews early on and helps bring the light on them, shines the light on these issues early, which is important. And I think this pipeline of foreign people into staffing universities is an issue that once people see it, because the light is being shown on it, will be motivated to act. And I don't, on the free speech question, just to quickly address it, this in no way restricts free speech to restrict the number of non-citizens who are admitted as students or hired as staff. The United States has no obligation to allow people from abroad to come into our borders and has no obligation to give them employment opportunities. Our obligations are to Americans first and foremost, and so restricting people entering the United States is not restricting speech in any way.
Very good. Thank you so much for this presentation. Seriously, it has been one of most well laid out, intelligent, wonderful work.
Thank you.
Obviously, it's great. I didn't tell you how high a bar that was. But consider our last one was with Ilya Shapiro, with whom you were in very good company.
Yeah, and he is excellent.
So
Uh,
yeah, by all means.